A mad experiment in the 1950s that produced a two-headed dog? Tens of thousands of people watching a man sitting on a pole in Atlantic City? This isn't your usual list of facts. These will have you rushing to Google and double-checking, but I assure you, they are all true. I'm Mike with List 25, and join me as I count down 25 bizarre facts you won't believe are real. 25. The first passengers in a hot air balloon were animals. How long ago did humans figure out we could navigate the skies in nothing more than a giant sack? The first people to get hot air balloon technology off the ground were two French brothers, Etienne and Joseph Montgolfier. In 1783, they launched the Aerostat Rebellion, a giant piece of cotton canvas held together by a metal dome piece. It was massive, measuring almost 60 feet high and 40 feet wide and weighing over 800 pounds. Astonishingly to the public, it was a success, flying high above the Palace of Versailles in Paris. And inside, as the first ever air passengers, was a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. The flight only lasted around 8 minutes, covering around 2 miles before landing safely. Who would have guessed the first aviators would be farm animals? 24. 1 pint of beer takes 20 gallons of water to make. Beer or water? Well, beer is made up of 90% water, so it's kind of like asking for the same thing. The only difference is that beer production uses a lot of water behind the scenes, from cleaning equipment to generating steam for boilers. By the time beer is being poured at your local bar, between 20 to 30 gallons of water goes into every single pint. So don't waste it. 23. Bacteria in the human body weighs 6 pounds. Here's a weight you can't shed no matter what diet you try. You might not be able to see it like fat, but microorganisms are everywhere on our bodies, from the skin to the gut, all the way to the brain. All in all, there are trillions of them. And if we could bundle these all together and put them on a scale, it would amount to between 1 and 3% of our body mass. For a 200-pound person, that would mean 6 pounds of bacteria. It's a good thing most of these are on our side, serving to, protect us from infections and helping to break down food. 22. A penguin's body can filter seawater. Are you trapped on a desert island? Well, there's one important rule to remember. Don't drink the seawater, no matter how tempting it might seem. Human bodies simply aren't designed to process that much salt. Penguins, on the other hand, they don't have that problem. They have tiny desalination filters inside their bodies. Just like giant plants that transform salt water into fresh water for us to drink, a select group of animals like penguins and pelicans have tiny internal desalination factories. Inside their bills, tiny salt glands extract salt and then secrete it out the tip of their beak, leaving unsalted water to drink freely. 21. A Russian surgeon removed his own appendix. If you've had your appendix removed, then you'll know the feeling of waking up a little confused with a scar on your lower belly. Now imagine instead of a hospital, you're working on a remote research base in Antarctica, in the middle of a snowstorm. Luckily, you're a surgeon. Your name is Leonid Rogozov, and feeling brave, you decide to become the first person to perform an appendectomy on yourself. This guy, Rogozov, really did that. The Russian doctor had cut himself open and worked his way around without gloves, using just his touch. The operation took almost 2 hours, but it was a success. Now that's a surgeon I'd trust. 20. Princess Diana's grave is on an island. Princess Diana was the people's princess, who earned millions of loyal fans. And in 1997, her death in a tragic car crash shocked the world. Unfortunately for Diana devotees, her resting place isn't open. Her gravesite is pretty inaccessible, located on an island surrounded by a lake. It's located on the grounds of Althorp, a huge estate that Diana's family has owned for hundreds of years. On the other side of the water, there's a memorial for anyone who wants to pay tribute to the late princess, surrounded by 36 oak trees, one to represent each year she lived. 19. Ectopic pregnancy. You know the story of pregnancy. It's pretty simple, right? A man fertilizes a woman's egg that then grows inside her uterus, but what if an egg grows outside the uterus? That's what an ectopic pregnancy is, and it can happen to up to 2% of all pregnancies. If left untreated, organs can be pushed and even burst, causing serious injury or death to the mother. Luckily, ultrasounds and blood tests can detect ectopic pregnancies early, making women much safer, but there is still a risk. 18. Rare 40-year-old stone baby found in elderly woman. This next one is what happens in rare cases when ectopic pregnancies aren't treated. When an elderly woman started experiencing pelvic pain, she visited a doctor, expecting some kind of muscle or joint injury. But what she was told shocked her. An x-ray showed something in her abdomen called a lithopedion, also known as a stone baby. Pictures of these are haunting. They're formed when the fertilized egg grows in the abdomen, and sometimes when they fail, the body covers it with tissue to protect it, slowly calcifying over time. This stone baby had been inside the old woman's body for years without her even knowing. 17. Vantablack is the darkest substance available. Are you tired of your plain colored walls and you feel like giving your room a paint job? Well, how about coating it with something called Vantablack? This material absorbs over 99.9% of light, resulting in the darkest kind of black you will ever see. Or not see? I don't know. Vanta stands for Vertically Aligned Nanotube Array, which is basically a bunch of carbon atoms known as nanotubes spaced out enough for light to get trapped. The results are stunning. A video of a car painted with Vantablack looks like something out of a video game. It's perfect for camouflage. So if you want your house to give you that feeling of falling into a black hole, well, this is the paint for you. 16. Botulinum toxins in foods can cause paralysis. Here's why food poisoning can be really serious. When foods like spinach, mushrooms, fish, or meat aren't processed or stored properly, something called botulinum toxins can be found. And as the name suggests, these are extremely toxic. When these make their way into the human body, they can cause dizziness, weakness, and blurry vision. But it gets even worse. On the severe end of the scale are neck and arm paralysis or breathing problems, which can be fatal. 15. Plants can run a fever when they're sick. Putting your hand on their forehead is a surefire way to tell if someone has a fever. But what about plants? You might not expect it, but plants are also prone to fevers. One experiment put a handful of healthy leaves inside a container and measured the temperature of the oxygen they produced. Then, the same was done with leaves suffering from a virus. The sick plants had temperatures up to 3.5 degrees hotter. Unfortunately, though, they just can't call into work sick. 14. The US government tried to make it rain with dynamite. What lengths would you go to for a drizzle in the summer? And I'm not talking about some kind of rain dance. I'm talking about a government-funded experiment back in 1891. What did a group of top scientists figure was the best way to induce rainfall? Exploding a bunch of dynamite in the sky? Yeah. They believed that a massive sound would jiggle clouds enough for them to pour the water out, based on a theory by a Civil War general. It turns out he was wrong. After lifting 1,000 pounds of dynamite above El Paso in a hydrogen balloon and exploding it midair, there was some rain around the city, but not enough to be considered a scientific discovery. At least the neighbors would have enjoyed a nice light show. 13. Women in the Swiss Army had to wear men's underwear until 2021. Women have served in most armies around the world for decades now, if not centuries in some places. But there's still a lot of catching up to do. In the Swiss Armed Forces, where around 147,000 soldiers served, it wasn't until 2021 that women had a very basic need met: underwear. Now, they were supplied underwear. Before, only it was the same as men's. And it's obvious there are plenty of differences between the two. I mean, I know I wouldn't want to be wearing women's underwear, let alone fighting a war in them. But you know what else is bizarre? They haven't liked, shared, commented, or subscribed yet. I mean, it really helps the channel. Also, don't forget to check out our socials. 12. In the 1920s, pole sitting was trendy. Remember when planking swept the internet? Well, that wasn't the first time a ridiculous public activity took hold for no apparent reason. Back in the 20s, all the cool kids were pole sitting, and it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. People would find a pole, climb to the top, and then sit on it for as long as they could. One man, Alvin Kelly, made the world record by sitting on a pole in Atlantic City for 49 days. Over a period of 7 weeks, he attracted tens of thousands of visitors. He kept his food mainly to soup, sleeping with legs wrapped around the pole, and peeing into a bucket. Sadly for Alvin, the Great Depression put an end to the pole-sitting trend and put him out of a job. 11. Mummies used to smell really nice. You might think that 1,000-year-old mummies would smell horrible, and that might be the case now, but the mixtures used to preserve them once had quite a pleasant aroma. That's according to a group of researchers who set out to recreate the exact scent of some embalming fluid. They used fluids found in ancient jars, analyzed trace amounts, and put together a final product that included plant oil, beeswax, and pine. Apparently, it gives off a woody kind of pine-like scent. I mean, that sounds just like a commercial for Hugo Boss or Sauvage. God, perfume and cologne commercials are so weird. Oh, what a weird... I mean, I know you can't, we don't have smell-o-vision yet, but man, they're just weird commercials. 10. A fully intact fly was found inside a man's colon. A colonoscopy is never going to be a pleasant experience. And in case you don't know what it involves, I'll give you the PG version. A tube goes up your butt with a camera attached. This is mainly used to look for cancer or bowel conditions. However, in some rare cases, the doctor might spot something else. In one instance, the fly was discovered inside a 63-year-old completely intact. I mean, the fly. I'm sure the 63-year-old was also completely intact. Doctors had no answer as to how this could have happened, and no one had ever seen anything like it before. I think I'll just be double checking my takeout from now on, just in case. 9. 19th century mummy unwrapping parties. It wasn't the Hollywood franchise The Mummy that started our fascination with ancient Egyptian artifacts. At the end of the 18th century, a wave of Egypt obsession spread through England, dubbed Mummy Mania at the time. And before artifacts were under strict protection, they were freely traded and exported to England. That's what led to an incredibly strange trend among wealthy people known as unwrapping parties. Now, I talked about the smell of mummies earlier, but this would have been the way to experience that smell, firsthand. People would gather to watch an ancient body being unwrapped for the first time in thousands of years. I mean, to each their own, but that's not exactly my idea of a party. 8. Smoking scorpions. You're probably used to the standard anti-drug campaigns that warn kids about the dangers of smoking, drinking, and more dangerous substances. But in places like Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan, they have to warn against something a little different: scorpions. At some point, someone figured out that getting stung by scorpions produces a euphoric high, which can last between half a day to 3 days. Apparently, it's a lot stronger than heroin. Instead of injecting a needle, users put a scorpion in their hands and wait for it to sting them. Be warned though, the first few hours are filled with extreme pain and usually makes you feel sick. Like any strong drug, there's also a risk of, death. And dying after being voluntarily stung by a scorpion is probably not how you want to be remembered. 7. Cordyceps is a kind of fungi that controls insects. Zombies are real. At least, this kind of fungi comes as close as you can get to what you and I think of as a zombie. The Cordyceps can take full control of an insect and use them to its own advantage. You're probably thinking, fungi, aren't those mushrooms? What could they possibly want? Well, first, Cordyceps deprive an ant or spider of nutrients, pollute the body with spores, and then create a perfect environment for more fungi to reproduce. But it goes even further. Sometimes it directs a body to go to higher ground or find other insects to maximize how the fungus spreads. That is truly mind control. Luckily for us, Cordyceps doesn't work on humans. At least for now. But I've seen enough zombie movies to know there's probably a tiny possibility somewhere in the future. 6. Karolina Olsson was in hibernation for 32 years. When Swedish woman Karolina Olsson fell into a deep sleep when she was 14, her parents were sure she would wake up shortly after. However, doctors failed to wake her, even by using electroconvulsive therapy. Karolina would half-wake for minutes at a time, just enough to have 2 glasses of milk before going back to sleep. She only finally completely woke up 32 years later. To this day, the case is still debated. Was it a medical anomaly, or did the family possibly lie about it? 5. Vladimir Demikhov created the world's first 2-headed dog. Back in the 1950s, a Russian scientist by the name of Vladimir Demikhov performed the unthinkable, creating a 2-headed dog. Vladimir was just about the most highly skilled scientist in transplantology, and to prove his mastery, he set out to fuse 2 dogs together. That was 3. 2, sorry. He attempted it a couple dozen times, and it wasn't until the 24th attempt that he had real success. The images are truly bizarre. They look like something AI might come up with, but they are in fact real. The head and upper body of one dog glued carefully onto the body of another. Sadly, it survived for only a few days. I mean, Frankenstein was written more than 200 years ago. Didn't anyone learn anything? Come on, Vlad. 4. Stan Larkin lived for 555 days without a heart. Stan Larkin appeared to be a regular-looking high schooler with a backpack on. That is, until you notice a large tube protruding out of his bag. Amazingly, this is where Stan kept his heart. Ever since he suffered cardiac arrest at a young age, it was discovered that both sides of his heart were failing. So doctors installed an artificial heart called Big Blue, a machine that does the same job as a real heart, pumping blood around the body. It kept him alive for 555 days while he waited for a successful heart transplant that returned him to full health. 3. A Moroccan serial killer was sentenced to be walled up alive. In Morocco, they do punishments a little differently than the rest of the world, especially 100 years ago. They saved the worst of them for the worst offenders, like serial killers. When a man named Haj Mohammed Mesfoui was finally caught after taking the lives of 36 women, the walls were closing in on him. Literally. Near a busy marketplace in Marrakesh for the public to see, Mesfoui was propped up standing and had a wall built around him. Apparently, crowds could hear him yelling for 2 days. On the third day, the marketplace was quiet. 2. Russian robotic company pays users $200,000 for their face and voice. In an age of surveillance, it's safe to assume most of what we do online can be traced back to us. But if you're willing to completely give up your privacy, you could have made yourself a cool $200,000. That's the sum a company called Promobot offered in 2021 for the rights to people's voices and faces. What will they use them for? To build a robot. And they didn't have any trouble finding volunteers, but their website flooded with tens of thousands of applicants. Maybe replicants? 1. Fat Men Club of New York. Body positivity isn't as new as it seems. In the 1860s, a club was founded in New York for one group of people: fat men. The rules for entry were strict: a $1 fee and a minimum weight of 200 pounds. The Fat Men Club of New York was one of many that swept the US at the time. Most of the activities revolved around eating, sometimes a 9-course meal. In some of them, there were even competitions over who could weigh in the heaviest. The winners would receive a small trophy of some kind. And those wouldn't be the only objects giving us a glimpse into the strange past. And when a strange coin was found in the 1950s dating back to the 11th century, archaeologists and historians were able to track down its origins in Norway. But how did it make that 3,000-mile journey? That part's still a mystery. Or how about over in Russia, where trees grow in spirals, turning and twisting instead of straight up in the air? The cause of these dancing trees? Nobody knows. To learn about dozens of weird objects that scientists still can't explain, click right here, and I'll see you next time.